Last night, I saw what they'd been hiding for years, and this morning, I'm not the same woman. If you don't like it, sleep on the floor. They said that. By morning, the music stopped, the bar closed, and everyone had to hear my silence. Welcome to Women's Stories, true stories, anonymized, told with respect. This story was submitted by a viewer to our channel. Here you'll find the courage to draw boundaries, the tears of being dismissed, and a way forward, even when the ones who hurt you are family. Today, I paid for everything so my child could have a dream wedding, and they sat me on a folding chair in the kitchen. I didn't yell. I spoke the language of contracts. If you believe dignity has a price, please subscribe, like, and comment. Your support carries these voices farther. Your story deserves to be heard. Send it to womenstoriess@gmail.com. We anonymize details upon request. I made 3 phone calls, then let the silence do the rest. Now, let's begin. Part 1, The Wallet and the Vision. Hello, my name is Ilara. Look, I'm not one for dramatics or complaining. For most of my life, I've been a problem solver. I was widowed young, raising my son alone as a freelance graphic designer, a profession where you have to fight for every contract and worry about every tax filing. I grew accustomed to living a proud, self-made existence. And my son, Liam, was the center of every effort, every sleepless night, every financial decision I ever made. Everything changed when Liam decided to marry Serafina. Right from the start, I saw the clash of 2 worlds. Serafina is beautiful and talented, but she grew up in an environment where everything had to be stylish, elevated, or professionally curated. For me, a wedding was a celebration of love. For Serafina, it was an art piece to be displayed, an event that needed to be perfectly documented. And sadly, that art piece required a budget that I knew only I could provide. Liam is a young doctor, still in his early career, meaning his salary mostly covered his student loans. I understood that, and I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to have a wedding day where he didn't have to worry about the cost. I told myself, I've worked my entire life. Now is the time to spend it on my son. I ended up selling a small portion of the house I'd worked like a demon to buy. The house where I fixed every wall and painted every room myself. I drained my entire emergency retirement savings. When I hit confirm on the first massive bank transfer to the venue, my hand didn't shake. I felt the power of motherhood. I was the enabler of my son's happiness, and I paid for everything. It wasn't that Serafina's parents couldn't afford it. They just had a different philosophy. They're nice people, but they believe children should build things themselves. Serafina's mother, Cecile, gave a small, airy laugh when she told me over the phone. Oh, Ilara, we admire your generosity. But you know, we're only paying for the absolute essentials. Our bride has a specific vision, after all. Their absolute essentials amounted to their outfits and the rings. Everything else, from the 12-piece jazz band to the 5-figure wine-tasting menu to the imported hydrangea arch, was mine. I meticulously tracked every cost in a massive Excel sheet. I knew every number. I knew I agreed to upgrade the linens from standard to Italian silk because Serafina said with a radiant smile, "Mom, Ilara, it will just elevate the pictures of our cake so much." I knew I signed off on the new venue, a glass and wrought iron conservatory, after Serafina sighed and said the community church I suggested didn't have enough natural light for the afternoon photos. I nodded and smiled, swallowing the feeling that I wasn't just buying a party, I was buying silent approval. And I waited. I waited for an offer to split the costs from their side, or at least a specific thank you from Liam or Serafina. It never came. Days before the wedding, I still believed my maternal role would be honored. I asked Liam gently, "Son, where will I be sitting? Should I prepare a toast?" Liam, already overwhelmed and stressed, replied dismissively, "Mom, you're my mother. You'll be at the VIP table, don't worry. Everything is being professionally handled by the planner." The planner. That was a word I heard a lot in those months. It seemed to be the wall between me and every important decision. Everything was outsourced to some nameless entity called the planner. The big day arrived. I spent the morning at the salon, trying to shake off the fatigue accumulated over a year and a half of planning and paying. I wore my new navy chiffon gown, the only jewelry a pearl necklace Liam had given me for my college graduation. I looked in the mirror. I wasn't perfect, but I was ready. I was the person who made this day happen. I drove to the venue, my heart pounding with nervous anticipation. I walked into the spectacular conservatory, where the afternoon light streamed in, creating a magical space. Everything was perfect, exactly what I had paid for. I saw Liam, adjusting his tie, laughing happily with his future father-in-law. I saw Serafina, the bride, looking like a Greek goddess. I walked toward my son, wanting to hug him. But before I could speak a word, the wedding planner, a young woman in a sharp black suit, cut me off with a professional but chilly smile. "Ms. Alara, there you are. I have a special place set up for you. This way, please." She didn't lead me to the VIP table. She led me down a narrow service hallway, through an unmarked wooden door, and into a room I instantly recognized. It was the staff staging area. The smell of garlic, oil, and incense smoke, from the Asian dishes, hung thick in the air. The clatter of metal was deafening. On one wall was a whiteboard with server schedules and dietary restrictions, and in the corner of the room, next to a stack of used silver trays and a giant industrial trash can, was my seat. It was a plastic folding chair, the kind used for trade shows. On the seat, a white paper napkin had been tossed carelessly. No flowers, no place card, no warm welcome. I stood there, blinking. I could feel the heat from the hot holding cabinets behind me and hear the clink of ice from a stuck catering cart. The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. The planner maintained her professional smile. "Ms. Alara, we've seated you here. It's very convenient for restroom access and the drink station. Serafina felt this was the best place for you to relax without being disturbed." Without being disturbed? I heard my voice tremble, but no words came out. What she meant was, without disturbing their perfect visuals. I looked at my navy dress, the expensive one bought with my meager savings. It was in stark contrast to the dirty plastic chair. And I realized the horrifying truth. Liam knew about this. He must have known. This wasn't an oversight. This was a deliberate arrangement. I gripped my small leather clutch, the one Liam had given me for Mother's Day when he still called me Mama. The hot, impulsive anger was suddenly gone. It was replaced by something cold, sharp, and calculating. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I slowly sat down on the folding chair. It let out a loud squeak. The smell of garlic and disappointment washed over me. I was the enabler, but I had been relegated to the ghost in the kitchen. I looked at the cold bowl of soup placed in front of me. I had paid for this luxury banquet, but I was being served like an anonymous member of the cleaning crew. This is when it hit me. I had bought my son a perfect wedding, but the price wasn't just money. It was my maternal identity, and they had stripped it away without a second thought. "Don't worry," I stayed seated. I stayed quiet. But in the shadows of the prep kitchen, I began planning something they never saw coming. This plan wouldn't be an explosion. It would be a strategic withdrawal. I wouldn't cause a scene. I would simply terminate the contract. And they would realize, when it was too late, that I was not just their wallet. I was their foundation. And that foundation, I was just about to pull out. I sat on that folding chair, and every muscle in my body wanted to erupt, to make a dramatic scene. I could have done it. I could have stood up, tossed that cold soup into the trash, walked straight into the ballroom, and demanded my seat at the VIP table. I had paid for it. I had paid for all of it. But that's exactly what they wanted, wasn't it? They wanted a dramatic Ilara, a cranky old mother causing a fuss so they would have a legitimate excuse to exclude me forever. I was used to being treated as an outsider, but this was a whole new level of humiliation. And it wasn't just coming from Serafina. Right after I sat down, the swinging door burst open, bringing with it a rush of cold air and a burst of laughter. It was Cecile, Serafina's mother, talking to a server. She wore a silk gown the color of jade, her pearls shimmering, looking every bit like the queen of the party. She saw me. She paused. She looked at the folding chair, at me in my expensive navy dress, and at the cold soup. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face for less than a second. Then it was replaced by a wide, reassuring smile that I had learned to utterly despise. "Oh, Ilara, there you are. What a great spot. You know, I always say the service area is the most fascinating part of the party. You get to see everything in motion. So relaxing, right? Do you need me to grab you some champagne?" She didn't ask me why I was there. She simply normalized it effortlessly, as if I were playing a game I'd voluntarily joined. And that was what hurt more than Serafina's snub. The easy acceptance and normalization from the other adults. I smiled, an utterly empty, vacant smile. "I'm fine, Cecile. You go enjoy yourself." Cecile was instantly relieved. She patted my shoulder as if I were a well-behaved child who wasn't causing trouble, and walked away, trailing her expensive perfume. I leaned back against the cold kitchen wall and closed my eyes. The music, the clinking glasses, the voice of Serafina's father, Robert, giving a celebratory toast. It all reached my ears like continuous blows. My daughter always dreamed of a fairy tale, and today, she has it. Cheers to Liam. That fairy tale was funded by me. But I had been edited out of the cast list. I opened the wedding program that I had paid to print. Robert's name was listed as escorting Serafina down the aisle. Fair enough. Cecile's name was listed as the first speaker. My name was nowhere. I was a wallet, not a mother. Then it was Liam's turn to speak. I held my breath. This was his last chance. His chance to acknowledge me. His chance to say, "And my mother, Ilara, who made this day possible." Liam's voice rang out, strong and confident. He thanked Serafina's family for welcoming him like a son. He said, "I feel completely at home with all of you." And then, the familiar, empty closing line taped onto the end of the speech. "And thank you to everyone who helped make today happen. Thank you for making this the best day of our lives." My name was not mentioned. Not once. In that very moment, a cold, ironclad truth settled over me. Liam chose comfort over gratitude. He didn't want to upset his wife or his in-laws. He accepted my exclusion as a necessary cost to maintain their so-called perfect vision. I looked down at my phone. I remembered the angry text message Serafina had sent to her friend that I accidentally saw on her laptop weeks ago. "My future mother-in-law is footing the entire bill. Go crazy. It has to be elevated." For a fleeting second, I wanted to sob. But I had no tears left. My tears had been spent on the late nights working to pay his tuition. I made a decision. I was not a supporting character. I wouldn't cause a scene. I would simply terminate the contract. I slowly stood up, walked through the back door, and stepped out into the cold night air outside the conservatory. The cool air hit my skin, cooling the heat of the kitchen and the anger boiling inside me. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My heart beat with every key press. I wasn't doing this for money. I was doing this for stolen respect. I opened my Excel sheet and went to 3 specific items. 1. Floral and decor contract. There was a separate clause for the next morning's brunch with full floral arrangements, priced at $8,000. I called the florist. My voice was eerily calm. "Hello, this is Ilara, the paying party. I'm calling to cancel the entire service for tomorrow morning." "Yes, that's correct. I understand I will forfeit the deposit. Keep it, thank you." The first cut. 2. Band contract. They had a package extending until 1 a.m. with a special performance after midnight. I called the band manager. "Hello, we won't be needing the second set after 11 p.m. Yes, it's a late change. I understand. Just keep the deposit and charge for the hours until 11. Thank you." The second cut. 3. Bar service contract. There was a large upfront payment for a fully open bar, including a specialty cocktail menu, lasting until midnight. I called the venue's catering manager. "Hi, this is Alara. I'd like to terminate the open bar service after 10:30 p.m. I apologize, no explanation is needed. Yes, please switch to a cash bar for all services after that time. Thank you." The third cut. 3 calls. 3 cuts. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply executed the rights of the person who paid the bill. When I hung up, I felt no guilt. I felt a cold, clear sobriety I hadn't known before. I was no longer the grieving mother. I was the executor of a seriously breached contract. I went to the restroom and adjusted my dress. It was 10:20 p.m. I knew what was coming. I returned to my folding chair in the kitchen. I couldn't smell the garlic anymore. I only felt the anticipation. 10 minutes later, right as everyone was dancing fiercely on the floor, I heard a sudden shift in sound. The music abruptly died. A loud clang followed as a server dropped a tray. The silence stretched, heavy and profound, then gave way to the uncomfortable murmuring of hundreds of guests. The swinging door flew open. I saw Serafina, her face pale. She was staring at her phone in horror. Liam rushed in behind her, his face a mask of confusion and annoyance. They were scrambling to find the planner. I allowed myself a slight smile. I sat there, like an ice queen on my plastic throne, watching their perfect world crumble under my silence. I hadn't said a word to them yet, and I wouldn't. Let them wonder. Let them search. Let them realize who had the power to make the music stop. My stillness didn't last long enough to witness the full aftermath of the dead music and the closed bar. The mission was accomplished. I had made my statement, not through words, but through controlled silence and financial action. I quietly left the staff staging area, walked straight out the service door, and drove back to my hotel. The luxurious room, paid for with my credit card, suddenly felt suffocating. I didn't take off my navy gown. I just sat on the bed, staring at my phone as it vibrated relentlessly. The screen lit up with missed calls and a torrent of text messages. Liam, 10:45 p.m. "Where are you? What happened to the band? Who canceled the bar? Call me back now." Serafina, 10:55 p.m. "Ilara, this isn't funny. Why is the brunch tomorrow canceled? Everyone is asking. This is seriously unprofessional." Driston Cecile, 11:15 p.m. "Ilara, you must know this is unacceptable. You've embarrassed the children. I don't know what you are trying to prove, but stop this childish behavior immediately." I read them, and I scoffed. Unprofessional, childish, embarrassed. Not a single person asked, "Are you okay?" Or, "We're sorry about where you were seated." They only cared that the product I had paid for was malfunctioning. I switched off my phone, placed it on the nightstand, and lay down. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I only felt a deep, wrenching emptiness following the anger, like a wound that has been cleaned and is now just cold. The next morning, I drove home. My house was quiet, orderly, and my sanctuary. I opened my tablet and pulled up the wedding budget Excel sheet that I had meticulously maintained. I wanted to review what I had paid for, not out of regret, but to solidify the justification for my actions. And then I found it. I had used a secondary credit card for smaller transactions, like deposits and minor purchases. When I reviewed the charges from the week leading up to the wedding, there were 2 large, suspicious entries. 1. Tasting event, The Gilded Spoon, $2,100. 2. Bridal wellness retreat, Spa Aura, $3,500. I had not authorized these charges. The Gilded Spoon was where Liam and Serafina held their rehearsal dinner. I hadn't been invited. They said it was an intimate event for the bride's immediate family. Spa Aura was where the bridal party had their low-key bachelorette spa day. Serafina had used my secondary card. The feeling this time wasn't anger. It was a chilling disgust. It was the final confirmation I needed. They didn't just exclude me. They saw me as an infinite resource they were entitled to tap without asking. I was a commodity, not a mother. I plugged in my phone and turned it on. It went wild with notifications. I didn't read the texts. I waited. I knew who would be coming for me. As expected, Liam showed up in the afternoon. No warning, no call. His knock wasn't strong, but it was insistent and impatient. I opened the door. Liam stood there, stripped of his groom's radiance. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt, his hair was messy, and his eyes were filled with fatigue and resentment. He looked more like a child denied candy than a newly married man. "Mom, you finally opened up. What is going on? Why did you cancel everything? Do you know how much you ruined?" He strode into the house, uninvited, and instantly stopped. His eyes swept over the mantelpiece, where the framed photos of him, from a toddler to his medical school graduation, were completely gone. "My photos, where are they?" His voice cracked, laced with sudden fear. "Sit down," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I didn't call him son. He slumped onto the sofa, his face defiant. "I didn't come here to argue about pictures. I want an explanation for your behavior. Everyone thinks you're crazy." I walked to my office, retrieved the tablet and a box filled with bills and bank statements. I placed everything on the coffee table between us. "I am not crazy, Liam," I said, keeping my tone perfectly level. "I am simply terminating a contract." I pushed the tablet toward him. I opened the banking interface, pointing at the 2 unauthorized charges. "Here are the bills for the fancy rehearsal dinner and the spa retreat that I was neither told about nor gave permission for. My card. No discussion." Liam stared at the numbers, his face contorted, not with shame, but annoyance. "Oh, God, Serafina. She said she was going to pay that back. It's not a big deal, Mom." "That is exactly the point, Liam," I cut in. "It's an illustration of stolen respect." I retrieved the tablet and shifted to the core, the part I needed him to truly hear. "I'm not angry about the money. I'm angry that I paid for everything, from the tie you wore to the elaborate floral arch. And when I showed up, you let them relegate me to a plastic chair next to a dumpster. You heard Serafina's father claim you as their son. You heard Serafina say I was visual clutter. And you didn't say a single word." His face was pale. He looked at the floor, avoiding my gaze. I'm sorry, Mom," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Serafina said. She said it was the planner's idea. She said you would be more comfortable in the quiet area." I gave a short, dry laugh. "Quiet? Or unseen? You chose your convenience, Liam. You chose your wife's perfect visual over your mother's dignity. You allowed them to erase me from the story, even though I wrote the first chapter with my sweat, my tears, and my retirement savings." I stood up, taking the box of bills. I placed it in his lap. "I am no longer your wallet or your backdrop. You bought your independence with my humiliation. Our contract is over." Liam looked up at me, his eyes filling with tears. It was the first time I saw real distress on his face, not over the cancellations, but over what he was losing. "You always said I was your whole world," he said, his voice choking up. "I did," I replied coldly. "I was, and now I am finally my own." I didn't wait for his response. I turned, walked straight into the kitchen, and began to make coffee. I heard the front door close, slowly and heavily, behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I only felt a deep, painful release and a vast loneliness where I could finally begin to build my own world again. The door closed behind Liam, and suddenly, the house was swallowed by a stillness that was agonizing. It was the kind of quiet you only feel after an emotional earthquake. There was no loud wreckage, just the absolute absence of familiar sound. I didn't cry. My tears had long run dry. Instead, I felt a coldness run down my spine, the coldness of accepting the final truth. I walked straight to the living room, where Liam's framed photos had once hung so proudly. Now they were just empty, faded patches on the wall. I had taken them down before Liam arrived. Not out of anger, but because I refused to live in a shrine to a past version of my son, a version that no longer existed. I packed them carefully, like fragile china, and stored them in the attic. It wasn't discarding memories. It was moving them from the altar to the archive. I sat on my old, comfortable sofa, the one I bought when Liam was a child. This was the chair where I read bedtime stories, bandaged scraped knees, and helped him study late into the night. Now, it was where I sat to feel the loneliness that I had intentionally created. But it wasn't the loneliness of someone abandoned. It was a purposeful loneliness, necessary for me to hear my own voice again. For decades, I had lived with three main roles: mother, provider, and problem solver. I couldn't remember the last time I had done something purely because I wanted to, and not because it served Liam's needs. The next morning, I started work. Not graphic design work, but life reconstruction work. I opened a new journal, a hardcover book in a deep green color that I had bought ages ago but never used. I started writing things Ilara wants, unrelated to Liam. 1. Learn Italian again. I love the sound of the language. 2. Redo the backyard garden. I always wanted deep blue hydrangeas. 3. Find the old, neglected guitar in the storage room. 4. Plan a dinner party. Not a big one, but a dinner for people who truly see me. That last point was the most crucial. I no longer believed in the definition of family by blood or marriage. Family, to me, now had to be people you choose, people who are committed to staying and respecting each other's presence. I opened my phone contacts. I didn't call Liam. I called others. First was Sophia, an old friend and fellow freelance colleague. We often commiserated over the phone, sharing the struggles of the industry and the headaches of taxes. Sophia was the only person who had sent me a short text on the night of the wedding, after the music stopped, simply saying, "I don't know what's going on, but I'm backing you up." Then there was George, my elderly, widowed neighbor, who always meticulously shoveled the snow from my walkway before I ever had the chance. He never asked for anything, just did it quietly, thoughtfully. And finally, Tam, the owner of the small coffee shop I visited every morning. She didn't just serve coffee. She always asked about my work, my health, and she genuinely listened to the answers. I invited them all to a dinner party on Saturday night. No theme, no gowns, just good food and genuine company. Over the next few days, my house suddenly buzzed again, but not with anxiety, with anticipation. I went shopping, selecting ingredients I loved: lemon-roasted salmon, pan-seared asparagus with garlic, and a rich dark chocolate mousse that I never dared to make because Liam didn't like things too sweet. In the kitchen, I put on some jazz, the music I'd forgotten I loved so much. I had lived so long with Liam's preferences that I'd forgotten my own. I cooked, not with the pressure to impress, but with the pure joy of an artist creating. My kitchen was no longer a place of humiliation, but the new heart of the home. Saturday night arrived. I wore a soft, comfortable wool dress. I lit a scented candle and set the table. No Italian silk linens, just simple china and the wildflowers I'd picked from the yard. No folding chairs, no VIP seats, just equal, ample chairs for everyone. George arrived first, carrying a bottle of red wine and a radiant smile. Then Sophia, who immediately hugged me tight. Tam came last, bringing a bag of freshly roasted coffee beans. We ate, we laughed. We told real stories, not stories that had been elevated or curated. Sophia talked about failing at all-nighters. George recounted a disastrous fishing trip. Tam talked about dealing with demanding customers. And I told them about the folding chair in the kitchen. Not to complain, but to share the truth. When I finished, the room was silent. Not the silence of judgment, but the silence of empathy. Sophia spoke first. She didn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry," she said. "They weren't worthy of you, Ilara, not one bit. George nodded softly, putting his hand over mine. Sometimes, he said, his voice deep and warm, the people who aren't related to you are the ones who see your soul the clearest. That was when I knew. This was my family. Not by accident, not by blood, but by choice. Towards the end of the evening, as we savored the chocolate mousse, Sophia raised her glass. She looked straight at me. Her voice was firm, not sentimental. To Alara, to the woman who was brave enough to close an old chapter, and to knowing that it is never too late to reclaim the head seat at your own table. Everyone clinked glasses. I closed my eyes. I had found my seat. Not at the grand VIP table, not in the cold kitchen. It was right here, among my friends. I slept well that night. No nightmares of music cutting out or the smell of grease. Just peace. My life, finally, was mine. My stillness didn't last. Though I had silenced my phone and computer, the echoes of resentment from the wedding still found their way to me. On the Monday after the dinner party, as I was sipping coffee Tam made and trying to get back into a work rhythm, my email inbox exploded. It wasn't from Liam or Serafina. It was from Cecile, Serafina's mother, and her lawyer. Subject: legal notice regarding breach of service contract. Cecile didn't attack me emotionally. She attacked me commercially. The email was long and dry, but the core was this. My last-minute service cancellations breached contracts with vendors, even though I was the one paying, causing financial damages and reputational harm. They demanded I compensate them for all resulting costs, including cancellation fees, the price difference for the replacement band to cover the time gap, and costs incurred by affected guests. I read the email once, then again. I chuckled. I had been waiting for this. Cecile couldn't understand the language of emotion, so she used the language of money. That was her only strength, but it was also mine. I had been a freelance designer and an expense-tracking accountant for decades. I knew how to deal with fine print and complicated invoices. I sat down at my computer, pulled up the Excel sheet again, but this time, I wasn't tracking spending. I was tracking contractual clauses. I forwarded the email to my own lawyer, who helped me navigate complex design contracts. I attached the original vendor agreements, which contained clauses allowing the paying party to alter services within the limits of deposit forfeiture, and all my invoices. I added a brief note. My actions were legal within the bounds of the contract. Please respond to Cecile stating that I have absorbed the deposit losses and owe nothing further. If they choose to litigate, I am prepared to make public the entire cost of the wedding, including the 2 unauthorized credit card charges I found. It was a strategic power play. Cecile only wanted me to pay and stay quiet. But my willingness to make the immense total cost public, especially Serafina's credit card misuse, would be a PR disaster for their family. They wanted the perfect visual. I threatened to shatter it. Over the next few days, Cecile's response weakened until it went entirely silent. The legal battle was over. The emotional battle, however, was more persistent. That's when Liam returned. He didn't come to my house directly. He used a different tactic. One evening, George, my dear neighbor, knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable. Alara, I'm sorry to bother you. Liam came to see me. I frowned. What did he want? He wants you to talk to him. He asked me to tell you that he is deeply sorry about the seating and everything. He said Serafina was stressed and he made a mistake. He said he needs you, Alara. He said you're his mother and he wants you back. The message, coming from George, sounded genuine and pained. Liam had used my kind neighbor as an intermediary, an astonishing piece of emotional manipulation. I invited George inside and made him a cup of tea. I looked him straight in the eyes. George, you are a good man, a man who sees clearly. I appreciate you. But listen to this. Liam isn't sorry he hurt me. He's sorry that the hurt had consequences. I pointed to my coat, draped over the sofa. I am still Alara, still his mother. But now, I come with a price. That price isn't money, it's basic respect. And Liam refused to pay it. He chose his convenience and his image. Now, he wants me back to be the backdrop for his life, so he doesn't have to explain my absence to everyone. George quietly sipped his tea. I understand, Ilara. I just wanted to make sure you were sure. He is your son. He is, I agreed. But he is not my everything anymore. Tell him I'm fine. And if he wants to talk, he doesn't need a middleman. He knows my number. George nodded, looking relieved. He knew he had done his duty as a friend. After George left, I knew Liam would call. And sure enough, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Liam, I said, my voice calm, stripped of all emotion. Mom, you heard from George, right? I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I had no idea what you went through in that kitchen. I'm sorry for all of it. I just want you to come home. Serafina and we need you. His voice was tearful, but I could hear another sound. The panic of having to manage life without me. What do you need me for, Liam? I asked. Be specific. He hesitated. We need an explanation for everyone. About the canceled brunch. About the bar. You could say you got suddenly sick, or that there was a technical glitch. Can you just help me through this? And that's when I knew. He didn't need me. He needed me to act. He needed me to return to the backstage and read lines for a false narrative just to save his face. No, Liam, I said decisively. I won't lie for you. I won't be your cover story. I told you. I am no longer your backdrop. You can't do this to me! He yelled, his voice turning angry. You're my mother! You're supposed to support me! I supported you with everything I had, Liam. And you threw it away. I did it out of love, not obligation. And that love, you chose to kill. I didn't wait for a response. I said, Goodbye, Liam. I wish you happiness. And hung up. This time, no phone calls or texts came back. The true silence had arrived. The silence I had bought with my savings and my self-respect. I stood up, feeling stronger than ever before. I had won both the legal and the emotional manipulation battles. Now, it was time to live the life I fought to claim. The true silence arrived, no longer interrupted by phone calls or demanding texts. I didn't feel lonely anymore. My house, once a shrine dedicated to Liam's life, had become a creative studio for my own. I returned to the goals in my deep green journal, the ones I had promised myself. I started with the first, the one I had put off for 20 years, relearning Italian. Every morning, instead of immediately opening work files, I dedicated an hour to wrestling with the complex grammar and the lyrical sounds of the Romance language. I put on my headphones, closed my office door, and immersed myself in online lessons. It was an act that was purely selfish, simple, and utterly wonderful. It reminded me that I had a mind that needed nourishing, not just a wallet that needed refilling. I also started working in the garden. My neglected backyard was a perfect metaphor for my life, overgrown and chaotic. But I spent hours weeding, fertilizing, and planting the deep blue hydrangeas I had always dreamed of. I wasn't rushing. I learned patience with the soil, with time, and with myself. George, my dear neighbor, became my ally in the garden. He didn't talk much, just quietly helped me carry heavy bags of soil and shared helpful tips about pruning roses. George didn't mention Liam. He only talked about the present, about the soil, the weather, and his fishing stories. This new relationship didn't demand sacrifice. It required mutual respect. My newfound financial freedom also brought another opportunity. Throughout the years of raising Liam, I had always had to accept graphic design projects I disliked, the ones that paid quickly but offered no professional satisfaction. Now, with my retirement funds restructured and no more need to pay for Serafina's elevated expenses, I could choose my clients. I started seeking projects I was truly passionate about. Branding for small, socially conscious businesses. I spent weeks rebuilding my portfolio, pouring my soul into it. This fresh focus paid off. One morning, I received a call from a tech startup specializing in solar energy. They needed a complete brand identity, and they had seen my sketches online. I quoted them a higher price than I usually charged, but I presented a creative concept that I had been keeping in my head for years. I got the project. Not only that, they said the idea was something they had never seen before. This success wasn't just about money. It was the validation of my professional worth, something that had been overshadowed by my role as mother and provider. My life, finally, was aligning. One evening, I hosted another dinner for my chosen family, Sophia, George, and Tam. The atmosphere was completely different from the wedding reception. This was a space where people could take off their masks. We talked about fears, past failures, and uncertain hopes. During the meal, Sophia looked at me. "Seriously, Ilara," she said, sounding surprised. "You look so different lately. You have a certain radiance." I smiled, touching the pearl necklace Liam gave me, which I still wore, not for him, but because it reminded me of my own capacity for unconditional love. "Before," I said, "I lived like a firefighter, always ready to rush in and put out someone else's fire, always on high alert, exhausted by worry. Now, I've quit. I let the fires start and extinguish themselves. And you know what? The world kept spinning. I had learned a valuable lesson. My world did not collapse when I stopped holding it up. On the contrary, it expanded. This freedom opened another door. Romantic freedom. I hadn't dated since my husband died. I thought I had forgotten how. But George, with his quiet sensitivity, introduced me to a friend named Marcus, a retired history professor who had a passion for Renaissance art and, incidentally, Italian. Our first date was at a quiet art gallery. Marcus was warm, intelligent, and most importantly, he asked me about my work, about my dreams, and about my Italian. He listened, not with fake patience, but with genuine interest. When I told him about quitting my job as a firefighter, he just smiled. "Ilara," he said, "did you know the Italian language has a word for that? Dolce far niente. The sweetness of doing nothing. Or in your case, the beauty of only doing what you want." I realized that this was the first time I was dating a man who didn't need me. He just wanted to be with me. My life, after the disastrous wedding, had become richer. I was no longer the drained wallet. I was an artist, a gardener, an Italian student, and a woman in love. I had reclaimed my own story, one word, one flower, one contract at a time. My life had settled into a new orbit, peaceful and filled with things I truly loved. Marcus became an essential part of my life. He wasn't a replacement for Liam's role, but a companion on my journey of self-discovery. We spent time visiting museums, talking about history and art late into the night, and practicing our Italian together. He was a man who respected my silence and celebrated my creativity. My solar energy project was a resounding success. The brand identity I designed was praised as groundbreaking and surprisingly sophisticated. This brought me not just money, but validation of my capabilities, something I had suppressed for years. I had built a safe barrier around myself, but I knew, in life, sometimes those barriers have to be tested. The test came on a Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after the disastrous wedding. I was at the art gallery that Marcus and I frequented. It was the opening of a modern sculpture exhibition. I was wearing a simple but sharp black dress, exuding the confidence of a woman who had rebuilt her life herself. I was talking animatedly with Marcus about the meaning of an abstract piece when I heard a familiar voice, laced with surprise and discomfort. "Mom Ilara?" I turned around. Serafina was standing there, her arm linked with Liam's. They both looked strained and unsettled. They had come likely to construct a sophisticated power couple image for some social event. Serafina was wearing a complicated fussy dress, but it looked constricting and out of place in the artistic space. Liam looked more awkward, his eyes constantly scanning to see if anyone might recognize us. "Hello, Liam. Serafina," I said, my voice calm, like greeting two passing acquaintances. Marcus's appearance right beside me stopped them both. Marcus politely smiled and extended his hand. "Hello, I'm Marcus, a friend of Alara's." Serafina glanced at me, then at my dress, then back at Marcus, as if trying to place me on a new social ladder. In her world, a widowed mother should be dowdy, tired, and certainly not with a charming companion or a successful project. Liam quickly regained his composure. "Mom, how have you been? I heard from George you planted flowers. You and this friend." His voice was filled with unrestrained curiosity, mixed with a hint of betrayal. He hadn't called me in 6 months, yet he felt slighted to see me happy. I chose not to answer his personal question. I chose to speak about things they could understand. "I'm well. Life has been busy," I said. "I just wrapped up the branding project for Solaris Tech." They were very pleased. Serafina reacted instantly. She was the one person who understood the significance of the name Solaris Tech in startup circles. "Solaris? No way! They had a massive budget for a rebrand. My brother tried to get that contract. How did you get that work?" Her voice was stripped of arrogance, exposing clear incredulity and envy. "I submitted a proposal. They liked my idea," I replied simply. I didn't need to explain myself. Liam was genuinely paying attention now. He was so accustomed to his mother working to pay off debt that he couldn't grasp his mother working to achieve success. "Well, that's great, Mom. I'm happy for you," he managed, the sentiment sounding hollow. Serafina quickly took Liam's hand, attempting to pull him away. "We need to go, Liam. We have to meet a partner," Serafina said, trying to salvage her presence. But Liam hesitated. There was something in his eyes, a struggle between selfishness and genuine regret. "Mom," he said softly, just loud enough for me to hear. "You look happy." I looked at him. I saw the fatigue on his face, the strain of a marriage I knew was struggling. Serafina had posted cryptic social media updates about sacrifice. I knew, without my limitless wallet, their marriage was encountering real financial problems they weren't used to handling. "I am happy, Liam," I replied. "And it's not happiness bought with someone else's money. It's happiness built with my own 2 hands." I said no more. I turned back to Marcus, who was waiting patiently. He took my hand naturally. The encounter lasted no more than 5 minutes, but it clarified everything. I didn't need to shout or argue. My reaffirmation of worth was the loudest statement I could make. Liam and Serafina quietly walked away, their presence suddenly dim in the artistic light. I knew, in Liam's mind, the comparison had been made. His mother, whom he had cast aside, was now more radiant and successful than he was. We continued our conversation. Marcus asked me about the concept of a piece. I smiled, pointing to the abstract sculpture. "This piece," I told Marcus, "is about finding form after everything has shattered. It's about realizing you don't need to be the old version to be something even more beautiful." As we left, I realized I no longer felt any bitterness toward Liam. I only felt a passing pity. I had won, not by destroying his wedding, but by building a new life that he no longer had the right to enter. The brief encounter at the art gallery was not painful, but the final test of my hard-won peace. For a few weeks after that, there was silence. I thought Liam had finally accepted the boundary. I was wrong. Liam's next move wasn't an angry text or a tearful phone call. It was a formal letter, sent via certified mail, with Serafina's name on the return address. I received the letter while I was gardening with Marcus. He had been patiently teaching me how to prune the hydrangeas, and I loved the feeling of working with my hands, creating something beautiful without having to pay for it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short, cold letter, printed on law firm letterhead. It wasn't a new lawsuit, it was a desperate plea cloaked as a business proposal. The letter explained that Liam and Serafina were in serious financial distress related to their inability to keep up with the mortgage payments on the apartment they bought after the wedding. They had put almost all their cash into the down payment, believing the massive wedding budget would be quickly recouped. But without my continued support, and with Serafina losing a large contract, they were facing foreclosure. They were requesting that I, as the person who funded the wedding, help them co-sign a large loan, secured by my own house as collateral. The letter ended with the sentence, "This is an emergency. Please remember your maternal obligation and protect your son's future." I read the letter, and I didn't feel rage. I only felt weariness and a deep sadness. This was Liam's final acknowledgement that he had misjudged my value. He thought my love was so endless and unconditional that he could humiliate me. And when he hit rock bottom, I would still return as his savior. I folded the letter. Marcus stood beside me, not asking, just silently waiting. "They want me to use my house to save theirs," I told Marcus, my voice low. "Not with cash, with my own future." I told him about the mortgage, about their recklessness, and about the section of my house I'd sold to pay for their lavish party. Marcus handed me the pruning shears. "Ilara," he said, his voice measured. "They cut their own branches. Your job is to protect your roots." The final coffee shop meeting. I didn't reply by mail or phone. I agreed to meet Liam at Tam's coffee shop. Tam, with her quiet intuition, set us up in a private corner and served our coffee without a single word about the meeting. Liam arrived, alone. He looked haggard. The desperation was genuine. "Mom, I beg you." He started immediately. "I know you're angry. I deserve it. But if I lose this apartment, Serafina and my careers will be ruined. Can you please co-sign the loan? I swear I'll pay it back. It's the only way." He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I gently pulled mine back. "I sold a piece of my home to pay for your extravagant party, Liam," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Do you remember that party? The one where I sat on a plastic folding chair in the kitchen?" He bowed his head. "I know. I was wrong. I'm sorry about the chair. I truly am. But right now, I'm talking about my future. My home." And that was the core issue. He was apologizing for the consequence of the action, not the action itself. He still didn't grasp the nature of the betrayal. "Do you know what genuine regret means, Liam?" I asked. Genuine regret means acknowledging that you chose a perfect visual over gratitude, and that regret does not come with a new financial request attached. I pushed my tablet toward him. It displayed 2 images. One, a screenshot of the 2 unauthorized credit card transactions Serafina made for their pre-wedding retreat. 2, a screenshot of the budget ledger I maintained. "This is what I see, Liam. I see systemic disrespect. I see irresponsibility. You and Serafina burned through your money, and mine, for a dream you believed would be cushioned by my limitless foolishness." My voice was not raised, but it carried the weight of unassailable truth. "I spent 20 years building this financial stability. You want me to mortgage my home, my security, to rescue an impulsive decision of yours. I can't do that. I cannot destroy my reclaimed future to fix the past you discarded." He looked at the tablet, tears starting to fall. They were tears of defeat, not repentance. "So you're going to let me lose my home?" he asked, his voice full of accusation. "I'm not letting you lose your home, Liam," I replied. "You chose that the moment you decided my dignity wasn't worth as much as a silk tablecloth. I won't save you. I have been saving you your whole life. Now, you have to save yourself." I stood up, placing cash on the table for both our coffees. "Goodbye, Liam. This is the last time we will discuss this matter. I wish you luck. I hope you learn how to be the man I once believed in." I walked away without looking back. Stepping out of the coffee shop, the sunlight hit my face. I felt a sense of final liberation and incredible lightness. I had drawn the ultimate boundary. I had chosen my own survival over my son's rescue. The final, silent confrontation with Liam at the coffee shop didn't just bring relief, it brought clarity. I had drawn a boundary so sharp and final that it severed the emotional and financial chains that had bound me for decades. I was no longer waiting for an apology or a rescue. I was actively pursuing my own survival. My next step, however, was monumental. I decided to sell the house. This house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was a museum of my life as a mother. Every chipped paint spot, every stain on the kitchen counter, every height mark etched on the doorframe was a memory of Liam. Selling it felt like performing surgery on my own history. I spent the next month in a state of controlled, methodical detachment. I didn't rush the process. I didn't grieve. Instead, I sorted. I hired an appraiser and a realtor. The realtor, a sharp woman named Diane, immediately understood my objective. This was not a transaction, it was an emancipation. As I packed, I faced the ghosts of my past head on. In the attic, I found Liam's old trophies, his elementary school drawings, and stacks of cards from Mother's Days past. I didn't discard them. I digitized the most cherished items, the handmade cards, the funny notes, and stored the rest neatly. I realized that the love I felt for my younger son was still real, but the worship of the man he became had to stop. The house was not being sold to erase Liam. It was being sold to free Ilara. The money from the sale, combined with the successful commissions from the Solaris Tech project, put me in the strongest financial position I had been in since my husband passed away. I restructured my investments, focusing on long-term stability rather than short-term gain, a luxury I earned by refusing to fund Liam's recklessness. The anchor, Marcus, and the Italian dream. During this tumultuous period, Marcus was my anchor. He never pressured me, never pushed me to make decisions, but simply held space for me. Our relationship deepened, moving from companionable friendship to a profound, mature love. He recognized the strength beneath my quiet exterior and celebrated the creativity I had kept hidden. It was Marcus who first suggested the permanent move to Italy. "Ilara," he said one afternoon while we walked through a sun-drenched park, "the old life is fighting to pull you back. You need to put a continent between you and the ghosts. That little villa in Tuscany isn't just a place to write. It's a blank canvas for the rest of your life." I agreed. The decision wasn't an escape, it was a reclamation of my geography. I chose to be where the air tasted like olive trees and ancient history, not resentment and unmet expectations. Before the final closing date, I dedicated myself to the project I had put off for so long, writing the book. It wasn't just about design, it was a manifesto. I poured all the lessons learned from the folding chair, the unauthorized charges, and the final plea for a cosign into its pages. I wrote about the psychology of the freelancer, the danger of underpricing your work, and the fatal mistake of letting clients, or family, dictate your self-worth. I titled it The Non-Negotiables with the tagline, "Define your worth, set your price, never be the folding chair." I bypassed traditional publishing. I used my own design and marketing skills to self-publish the ebook, offering it directly to the freelance community. This was about control and message, not profit, though I priced it fairly, following the very advice I preached. The final toast and the viral triumph. On the last night, I held a small farewell dinner. George, Sophia, Tam, and Marcus gathered around my simple dining table. The contrast with the wedding could not have been starker. No forced speeches, no expensive linens, just profound, genuine connection. Chas. Sophia raised her glass. To Ilara, you turned being a victim into being an author. You are teaching us all how to charge what we're worth. Tam shared a beautiful Italian phrase she'd learned just for the occasion. In bocca al lupo, which means into the wolf's mouth. A superstitious way of wishing good luck, which felt wonderfully fierce and appropriate. George, tears in his eyes, simply hugged me and said, "Go live your masterpiece, Ilara." When I finally drove away, the rear-view mirror held only the empty, silent house. I felt no sorrow, only the exhilarating lightness of having nothing left to lose. The move to the small, sun-drenched villa in Tuscany was instantaneous bliss. Marcus and I settled into a rhythm of reading, writing, gardening, and exploring. My Italian lessons quickly turned into natural conversation. I was no longer rushing through life. I was savoring it. Then, the unexpected wildfire of success erupted. My book, The Non-Negotiables, exploded across design and entrepreneurial forums. People weren't just reading it, they were having epiphanies. They were sharing the core lesson, the folding chair metaphor, as a rallying cry. I became a voice for thousands who had felt marginalized or taken for granted, both professionally and personally. Media requests poured in. I was no longer Ilara, the mother paying off debt. I was Ilara, the voice of professional dignity. One sun-drenched afternoon, while reviewing a contract from a major U.S. publisher who wanted to translate the book into 20 languages, my inbox flashed. A single email. From Liam. My hands stilled. The story was not quite over. The final piece of the puzzle, the final acknowledgement, was waiting to be read. I sat on the balcony in Italy, the rolling hills of Tuscany stretching out before me. I held the tablet in my hands where Liam's email was waiting. I had learned enough Italian to know that the verb acceptare means not just to wait, but to await. And I had awaited this moment, not for vengeance, but to measure the immense distance I had traveled. I opened the email. It was concise and lacked any dramatic apology. Subject: regarding the non-negotiables. Mom, I hope you are well. I saw your book. Serafina. We got divorced. She moved out and is suing her parents over a failed investment. I lost the apartment. I'm renting a small room near the hospital and working double shifts to cover my debts. I'm not writing to ask for money. I'm writing because of the book. A colleague showed it to me. I read it. I read the chapter on pricing your worth, and I realized I did the exact things you described as mistakes. I allowed other people to define my value, and I severely misjudged yours. You were right to do what you did. I know you won't forgive me. But I wanted to say one thing. I'm proud of you, and I hope you have found peace. You were right. Goodbye, Liam. I read it. Once, twice. I didn't cry. There was no pain left, only a quiet acceptance. Liam had finally understood, but not because I told him. He understood when life forced him to learn. He had lost his financial footing, lost his wife, and most importantly, lost the scaffolding he had relied upon. His regret wasn't born of love, but of practical consequence. But, for me, it was enough. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't need to. My answer was already written in my new life, in my book, and in my decision to not save him. The legacy of self-dignity. My book, The Non-Negotiables, continued its meteoric rise. I accepted a partnership offer from a major American publisher to translate the book globally. I was no longer Ilara, the mother working herself ragged to pay off a son's debt. I was Ilara, the acclaimed author and speaker, talking about self-worth. I hosted a massive online seminar from my Italian villa. Sophia was the opening speaker. Tam sent me fresh coffee from Vietnam. George sent a brief message. Your hydrangeas bloomed. I'm so proud. During the seminar, I shared the story of the folding chair in the kitchen. Not as a painful secret, but as a powerful teaching moment. We often allow others to place us in the position that is most convenient for them, I told the thousands of viewers. That folding chair wasn't just furniture. It was the symbol of the role I accepted in my son's life. But when I decided to get up and leave, I didn't just lose my heartache. I found my new seat. I ended the seminar with a declaration. Don't be anyone's folding chair. Be the table where you invite only those who are worthy to sit with you. The new table in Tuscany. My life in Italy was full of dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing, and gioia, joy. Marcus and I married in a small vineyard, with no fanfare, only the sincerity of those who love us. Sophia and George were honored guests, flying over from the States. We ate home-cooked food, drank local wine, and laughed under the Tuscan sunset. I was living the life I had postponed. My Italian was fluent. I dedicated time to my art. I allowed myself to be loved and respected. One morning, while drinking my espresso on the balcony, I received a package. It was a small, simple wooden box. Inside was a card. "Mama Lara, this is for you. I bought it after reading the book. I wanted it to symbolize a new start." Liam, inside the box was a single item. A hand-woven silk tablecloth in a deep navy color, the color I loved. The cloth wasn't worth the money I'd spent on his wedding, but it was worth more than any expense. It was the genuine, if delayed, acknowledgement. I held the soft silk cloth. I didn't use it to cover a table. I used it to drape over a mirror in my dressing room as a final reminder. I started this story by being banished to the kitchen. I ended it having built myself a new home, a new life, and a new definition of family. I didn't need Liam to come back. I didn't need a formal apology. I already had the greatest gift I could give myself: freedom and self-respect. And finally, I had become the star of my own story. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story mattered to you, please like, subscribe, and comment so more people can find it. And if you have a story that deserves to be heard, send it to womenstoriess@segmail.com. We anonymize on request. See you in the next episode.